Let me see if I can start it.
Uh-oh.
And then I'll stop. Don't know for sure, but I'm glad we got that out before we got recorded, though. So,
yeah.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get things kicked off here. I want to thank everybody for joining us this evening. It's been quite a few interesting months as we finally get this thing kicked off with our new association here, the American Australian White Sheep Breeders Association. This whole thing wouldn't be possible without our friend and guest tonight, Mr. Graham Gilmore. The way it's actually kind of worked out is throughout this whole process of importing this breed here in the United States, Graham's actually kind of kept a relationship going and helped create some relationships here between Sonia and David and myself. We've always just tried to, keep things as simple as possible and really just value the breed and the tradition that Graham and his family at Tatico Farms has developed here with this breed. And I think it's just kind of worked out really well that we've all stayed together and kept this thing going. And we think there's a lot of good things to come here in the future. And we're thrilled to death to have the working relationship with Tatico. And if you would please, just for if you're on unmuted, if you would please mute yourself. That way we don't have any background noise as well. That'll be just be a little more polite for everybody here. But anyway, like I say, it's just kind of funny how this is all played out. We're just kind of making this thing work, and we're glad to have the support of the Australian White Sheep Breeders Association of Australia behind us, as well as the support of Graham and his family. And we're looking forward to getting this thing going. So, without further ado, I'm going to open up the floor to Graham. Graham has asked that if anybody has any questions throughout his talk here, we're just going to allow him some time to discuss how he came about the breed and the process of developing it and where he's at today, where he sees it going, and everything that he wants to unravel to us here. And if you have any questions, raise your hand, or if you would just say excuse me and ask your question. Graham was more than happy enough to stop and answer questions as they come about, because sometimes people forget at the end of the presentation what they wanted to ask. So by all means, if you have questions, ask them, and we'll be glad to get them addressed. So without further ado, Graham, the floor is yours, mate.
Thank you, Luke. I like that mate bit. That's the Australian colloquialism, instead of partner, I suppose. Look, thanks everybody for joining in on this. I do apologise for missing the last one. I was actually an hour out on my times here and missed it. As Luke said, anyone that wants to ask a question through what I'm going to tell you about how this breed started and what it's all about, I'm happy to take questions all the way through, rather than just speak for a fair while and then have them all thrown at one stage. I don't mind if someone wants to step in. So basically, my background is my father started a Dorset Horn stud in 1959, the year I was born, and then progressed through to Pole Dorsets, and we've been a dominant force in those two breeds ever since. Dorset Horns are now basically extinct. There's hardly any left. They're a rare breed. Pole Dorsets are still going quite well, but the idea was that I was doing a lot of export in other breeds, so Pole Dorsets, Texels, another breed I was involved in, White Dorpers. So we're exporting those all over the world in live.
Hey, Graham, can you hear me real quick? Looks like you're on mute. Something happened.
Yeah, is that better again?
There you are. Sorry about that.
So when did I go on mute? if I go backwards, like so did everybody hear the background was a Pole Dorset sheep where it was our
Yes, sir.
background?
Yep, we heard that.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. So basically then we're still breeding Pole Dorsets. They're still a popular breed in Australia. And we've still got probably we have the premium stud in the country for quality. Went into South America, saw Santanese sheep where we were exporting genetics, and from that saw the Santanese being a head sheep, decided to come back to Australia and try and replicate a head sheep in a modern meat sheep in Australia. So by doing that, we used, just like if you're doing anything in genetics, you need to combine different things to get different types. And I would say the most similar thing to what we've done is probably the Santa Gertrudis breed of cattle, where they combine Shorthorns and Brahmins to create a new breed that's very even. We put 4 breeds in, so it was Pole Dorset stud ewes. They weren't commercial sheep; they were registered ewes, registered Texel ewes, and we crossed 2 breeds in being selected white Dorper rams and also selected Von Rui, which is a South African head breed that's a semi-fat tail sheep. So we put those breeds together, combined them, started doing a lot of the crossing was basically only got to F2, so a second cross. And then we selected out of those for type, picked a type that we wanted the animal to look like, which is the head shots behind Luke when he's on there. That was one of the early prototype rams, and we said, well, that's what we want our sheep to look like. So we bred to a particular type. We've line bred that animal intensely to get consistency, so that we don't get sheep that are all different types and shapes and muscle patterns. We're after animals that are very similar in muscle pattern and type and growth rates. So the journey was a long one. We started, the first lambs were born as F1s in 2008, and then we continued through till we got a little bit of type about them for where we were wanting to go, and started embryo transfer work. So the embryo work was designed around 2 things: to explode the population, and then exploding it, we could select the cream, the very best of those sheep to improve the breed. So we've done in the vicinity of 30,000 embryo transfers since 2010, just for our own farm use. There's been a lot of embryos exported through China, America, Canada, New Zealand, and plenty of other places as well. But for our own use, we're 30,000 embryo transfers, so you would produce 1,000 females, select the best 50, and flush those 50 to produce another 1,000, and so on and so on. So eventually we got a breed that is now very, very consistent, and that replicates itself in our commercial sheep. Our commercial sheep don't really look any different to our stud sheep, except they're not pedigreed. And those sheep are ticking the boxes on what we wanted the breed to be, which was all hair, black feet, so that the feet are a little harder. They're not as inclined to grow like the white feet do. We want a carcass shape, which we've got, high yielding carcass. So from live weight to dead weight, we're seeing most of our clients doing 50-52% on killing rates, and sheep that are due on grass, not have the need to be grain fed to finish, like many of the breeds around the world now won't finish without grain. Well, sheep are ruminants, and we want them to finish on grass if you have grass. So the only time they need grain is when they're short on grass. Lambing percentages are around 140, but we have people doing up to 170%, being the twinning rate. There's a lot of talk on trying to push twinning rates to 200% or more than that. And in my travels around the world, nearly every breed that has litters of lambs they don't have any meat on the lambs. They're skinny and they just don't do well. So that whether it's a Hahn or some of the ones out of China or in Mexico, whether it's well, not so much the Katahdin's got a reasonable lambing percentage, but some of the other breeds down there, they have the big percentages, but there's no meat on the lambs. So our idea was to have 1.5 good lambs is better than 3 bad ones. So that was the reason around that. We're not pushing for higher lambing percentages. We do have a breed that's quite polyestrous, meaning that it will join all year round, which is pretty important here, where we'd be joining every 8 months. We'd be rejoining the ewes. So they're sort of some of the things that were designed into the breed. And to get them in the breed and hold them in the breed, we had to line breed it to do it. So everything's pretty closely related. If you follow it back, they only go back to 6 different rams at the start, and there's been no new genetics put into it. Our numbers are big enough. We're not, inbreeding coefficients are not ridiculously high, but we want an inbreeding coefficient that's high enough to give us heritability. And if you don't have that, well, you don't have any consistency.
Graham, I'll step in here real quick. So
yep.
Often since we've started bringing this breed in here in the United States, seems like there's word that's been spread about the lambing percentages. And since you brought that up, people are talking about how the Aussie White doesn't have the high lambing percentages. And I think you explained that well, but for some of those that don't really, catch on, you talked about the 1.5 good lambs versus 3 bad lambs. A lot of the hair breeds over here are a higher lambing percentage, but as I've discussed with a lot of people, I'd much rather compare the breeds on the rail. As far as what they've lambed and what kind of meat we've got hanging there as far as pounds and everything. But you've also talked about being polyestrous. So could you just explain to the people how that was almost an advantage?
Well, your season in Australia, February, March, April is the ideal joining time, but we're about to start joining now. So that's gives you an out of season lamb being born in April, May. So it'll be just the reverse in the Northern Hemisphere. So that gives you the option to have lambs all year round. And some people will say, oh, well, my season's too cold or too hot at this time or too cold. Well, we're finding this breed does adapt pretty well to most conditions. We're in an alpine region that snows normally half a dozen times a year. That doesn't hang around like it does in North America, but the sheep handle those cold conditions with the hair and the heterotypic fibre. Heterotypic being a hollow fibre, they're actually much warmer than what a wool sheep is, particularly when they're born, because the lambs are born with a hair coat. They've got a thicker skin. So being able to join all year round, that gives you your same lambing percentages, but it spreads your income over the whole year, where you just haven't got one lot to sell. So say, for example, in New Zealand, they have one lambing a year, and the abattoirs actually closed for 4 or 5 months of the year, I think, over there, because there's no lambs to kill. Where what we want is a year-round supply. So when we're supplying lamb into fine restaurants in Australia or wherever around the world, we can supply the similar product all year round because of that polyestrous joining. So and they join better in the coming into autumn than they do for a spring lamb. They definitely join better then, but they still join out of season. You've still got me, have we?
Yep.
Am I still?
Yep.
So that's the reason. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. If you're going to get litters of lambs, you'll have a lot of lambs that are little skinny lambs, and eventually they won't get there because the parents haven't got a lot of meat on them either. So and I said it's the same wherever you go. The Peliway in Mexico gives you lots of lambs, but the only way they can get them finished is to put them into feedlots and artificially make them do. It's like feeding children lollies. Like, they'll grow and get fat, but they're not healthy. So our idea is we're a clean and green. So we will finish on grass. We will do better if there's supplements added, which obviously that will happen in a lot of areas. But we don't have to be. If there's green grass there and they're out on the pasture, they'll do well. So we'll back ourselves against any of the other breeds there. Our Pole Dorsets have got phenomenal growth rates, but they're used as a terminal sire on other breeds, where the Australian white, the idea there is you just keep joining back to Australian whites. So pretty similar to what an Angus would be. Just Angus, you get a consistent product. So does that sort of explain that? That's we're not going down. There's like most of the ones that talk in this country on high lambing percentages, they quote their scanning rates, scan at 200% plus. But all those ones that have got bigger litters, they also have a big death rate with their lambs. So we're getting scanning rates here on a couple of breeds that have put genetics into them that are from other breeds that are highly fecundant. But if you get a rain event or a bad wind, no lambs survive. So it's just something that we designed it to do particular things, and we're not changing the design just to suit someone that wants more lambs. And that's obviously some of the ones in America have decided that they'll water the breed down with another breed and call it something else, and that's fine too. But you don't have what this breed has when you start doing that in some of the traits in there from the eating quality. So it was designed to do the job properly as far as producing a really good carcass quickly. But then we also found out that we had a lot of eating quality traits that came through, mainly with the cross of the Texel and the Von Ruy, and there is where those eating quality traits, when they combined, it brought out quite a unique lamb that, and particularly in America, the American palate doesn't like that heavy lamb fat on your palate. I don't either. I used to like it because that's all I'd ever eaten, but now we have that lower melting point at about 34 degrees, and that's why they call us the Wagyu of the sheep industry. It's not the IMF in it; it's the low melting point.
Yeah.
So when it comes to IMF, lamb is difficult to get extremely high IMF in because it's killed when it's young. If you go into the Wagyu industry, they're 2-3 year olds before they're killing them. So the only way you're going to get that same thing in lamb is you'd have to keep them until they're 2 or 3 years old to get them to really marble up. But it doesn't need to do that. The main thing is that it doesn't. When you've got a haired sheep, it doesn't smell when you're cooking it as much as a wool sheep because it's that lanolin smell. And for the American palate, the Australian white is something that we're getting rave reviews out of America with it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I think back, one thing I had in my mind when you was talking about the lamb percentage there is, some of the other hair breeds here are high lambing percentages, but and they fit. I will say their strong point is they fit those 60, 80 pound market that people are looking for around here, the Eastern markets and ethnic markets. Those light lambs fit. But I think the one thing that I know David and I have discussed before is the Aussie White gives you potential to fit any market any time of the year. I mean, you'll finish well, you'll finish fast, but you've also got enough lambs to hit any style of market as well. So, yeah, very interesting. I guess one thing that I've always wanted to ask is how far along into the process of developing this breed was it that you knew you had a vision of what you wanted that breed to do or what you wanted it to look like, but what was it? How long ago was it that it snapped with you and said, I've got something. This is going to be something?
That's a good question. It keeps getting better, but basically what changes, and it's not that the better sheep get better, it's that the worse sheep get better. So it's like a football team that's really hard to beat. It's not the one with 2 stars, it's the one with no stars and all good players. So basically we're lifting the bottom line all the time, and that's what the embryo transfer has done. So the consistency, there's always going to be a variation in shedding ability, where some shed earlier. Some people like to push towards a real silky skin rather than one that's got a little bit more hair on it. I don't want the real silky one because they're a bit more exposed in cold conditions, and I'm not after the one that holds the really long curly hair either. So it's an in-between job on that. But when it sort of got to the stage we thought we're there, probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we thought, right, well, we've really got something. So in the early stages, the traditional sheep here for producing we don't call them fat lambs here, you call them prime lambs, but once you get onto Aussie whites, you can call them fat lambs again because the fat's good fat, it's not bad fat. We were running Border Leicester cross with a Merino ewe, and then you put a Pole Dorset with it, and that's the standard, the barometer for the best lambs in this country. It was only about 3 or 4 years ago that we got to the stage that the Australian white was matching those second cross Dorset lambs. So now we don't run anything but Australian white commercial ewes. So for any of you that follow along social media on the Taddykill meat, sheep and cattle page, you'll see big lines of commercial sheep that look like they're shorn, but they're not. They're just white. There's the evenness is quite incredible, and it's a lot better than we thought it could be in that short space of time. But modern technology combined with knowledge of breeding, which comes through years of experience of making a lot of mistakes, and line breeding something to get consistency, that's what's caused it to be this good. And no matter where we're sending it, whether it's into Inner Mongolia at minus 40 degrees centigrade, whether it's into Costa Rica or some of the warmer places in America in the summer, or the dry places in Australia where it's extremely hot and dry, they seem to be managing most of those conditions pretty well. And that, if they've got wool, they won't do that. But having the hair allows them to handle those areas. So in our area where we're cold, 1,200 metres above sea level, so it's an area of 4,200 feet from when I was on Imperial at school. It's pretty cold. So that's where they've been developed. But when they go into the warmer areas, they shed extremely well, and they still shed in the cold areas. So when we had Dorper sheep, for example, we would have to shear about 80 or 90% every year because the wool didn't drop out of them. It'd drop out of most of them if you took them into desert conditions, which were where they were developed for, but they wouldn't do it here. The Australian white does because it was developed here. And we selected for that trait of, in particular, shedding off the back rather than from the sides up, from the back down, so that if you're going to have a fly problem, it's normally it's the top of the sheep. It's not all around the breech. It's the top of the sheep that'll get blown. So, and we're not docking our commercial sheep at all anymore. Although on our females, there's a variation, and I'm sure the three of you that have got the embryos over there have noticed that some tails are shorter than others. We haven't done a lot of work at this stage on trying to shorten the tail, and we've got to be careful not to shorten it too much that you could end up with some of the issues that some of the dog breeds did in trying to produce a shorter tail, as they ended up with vertebrae problems. So on our commercial females, we'll shorten the longer tails to be the same length as what the shortest tail in the mob is. And we get less prolapses. The prolapse that comes with purebreds is more to do with viral pneumonia and coughing on a fat sheep rather than the length of the tail. But if the tails are left longer, they're certainly stronger on anal prolapse. So that's basically so the breed started with one family, one farm, a lot of hard work, a lot of nights lambing sheep in embryo transfer shed, and like we're through to the stage now. They've just finished tagging and marking all our commercial lambs born at the start of spring or in August. And they've tagged all the stud lambs. Now, all those sheep lambed in the paddock unassisted. First time they've hit a sheep yards was when they were up to 8 weeks old, so they're pretty heavy to pick up. But we tag the stud lambs, so they're very good mothers. You can split them off. Look, we'd run them in mobs of probably 150 ewes, would all lamb in one paddock to one sire, and then we'll drift them off and tag the lambs and then mark them after that. So your workload's just diminished. You don't have to be watching for flies. They're an easy care sheep rather than a high. A lot of people don't like sheep because you've got to be there all the time, watching them all the time. Well, even our commercial blocks, no one had been on the farm in 9 weeks. They were put in, set lambed in paddocks, haven't been there for 9 weeks, came back in and marked the lambs. They did them yesterday.
Well, you can tell it's a breed that has been developed to go to work for you, and that's not a pampered breed. Because I remember the time you was over here, you showed me a video of a ewe that just dropped lambs, and she was dang near taking your Kelpie dog on. I mean, the mothering instincts of the breed is there. So it's a breed that'll go out there and work and do it for you.
They're also like in a larger environment. They have a mobbing instinct that comes from the Von Ruy sheep, so they'll hang together. They don't graze the paddock like British bred sheep where they just spread out all over the paddock. They'll stay together in a group and move around, and that's a herding instinct from the South African breed that's in there. Not the Dorper. The Dorper's more if there's a predator or something, the Dorpers are more inclined to spread, where the Australian they group together, and that's coming from the Von Ruy. A lot of the mothering instincts are coming from Texel sheep. They're very quiet and inquisitive. So a lot of the traits that we've got in there have come from the different breeds. It's not just one breed that's dominating. People will say to me, well, they've got black feet, so the Texel must be dominant. Well, we don't even work out the percentages, and when the percentages, you're working them out, it's like in a family, not every child's the same, but the same mother and father, and they all look different. So it's the same thing in this, that we have full siblings that are vastly different to each other, and it's a matter of selecting through those to improve the breed.
Does anybody have any questions at this point? If you do, everybody should be muted, but if not, unmute yourself and ask a question if you'd like. I mean, take advantage of this opportunity that Graham is allowing us to visit with him and ask questions and bounce them off. He's definitely not shy and he'll answer any questions. So if anybody's got any questions, ask away, please.
Graham, I have a
Hi,
question.
it's Larry. Okay. I just was wondering, how old are your lambs when you're finishing them on grass?
6 to 7 months old, coming back at about 27, 28 kilos. So
Okay,
they're weaned at about 12 weeks, but we like to run them through to about that weight so that we've got quite a good carcass. So we run them through to being 54 kilos to 60 is normally what we're killing at. So what's pounds to kilos? 2.2 or something.
yes.
Yeah. So you can do the conversions yourself, but we're not feeding grain at all because we've got grain feed most of the time. But we might graze them on wheat crops when they're not in head, just as a green option, or oats. Yeah, that's all they graze on. We don't graze on canola or brassicas because it taints the meat. But that's about the weights that we're working towards. But you can do them a lot younger than that. And in some of the regions in Australia, they're doing 16 weeks. They're doing 24 kilos on the top end of their lambs.
Well, thank you.
No problems.
Graham, could you speak to which breed was providing that melting point?
Yes, we've done. I haven't sort of mentioned much about that side of it. The melting point's coming from the Von Ruy breed, 100%. We know it's not. We've tested Pole Dorsets. Our Pole Dorsets melt at 40 degrees, which is very low for Pole Dorsets. Normally about 42. The other breed, Texel, it's not a low melting point either. The Dorper's certainly not. The Dorper's higher than the Dorset, and the Von Rui's where that came from. So the combination Von Rue and Texel really, that's where we noticed that there was a difference in eating quality right at the very start. So in an F1 Texel Von Rue, we had that eating quality, and we didn't know we had it at that stage. We hadn't tested for it, so we're doing laboratory tests with Professor Aduli Malou that's been doing eating quality tests on melting points in sheep for about nearly 30 years now. But he did a lot of work in Wagyu in Japan with Professor Komatsu, who's sort of the godfather of all testing on Wagyu. And that's why they started saying we were the Wagyu of the lamb industry. It's melting point. So Wagyu averaged about 34 degrees. The best of it's low 20s. And we're about 34 degrees. So our Pole Dorsets average 40. Our Australian whites average 34. And I've just come out of a fairly large event in Sydney that we ran with our branded product called Margaret Lamb, that's only from our selected clients, with 40 of Sydney's elite chefs at it, and I couldn't do that with Pole Dorset. There'd be nothing different to it, but with the Australian white, we had 18 different dishes made from all over the carcass. It's not just a rack or a chop or a strip loin or a rump or a pulled shoulder. It was all different things like pastrami made out of shanks and bacon from the belly flaps, and all those different things we can make with this product. So once you've got a melting point down as low as that, we can make salamis, we can make Kranskis, chorizo, hams, prosciutto, you name it. You can do the same with Australian white as you can do with pork, which for us opens up many, many more markets through the Muslim market that can't eat pork. So we're working very hard on that as well. So this is quite a unique product in that melting point, and we didn't breed it for that. That was a fluke. But once we found we had it, then we started testing for it. We have a DNA test for those markers that we've got locked up, so that we can do a blood test for that now, rather than we used to have to do a biopsy on the loin. So we're doing it in the same spot every time, but we take sort of that top of your thumb out of the loin on each sheep and test it through the lab. Well, now we've found the markers for that, and now we just have to take some blood, and we could do it on a tissue sample or whatever. We take bloods and we test for those things. So like the females have a little bit lower melting point than the males, and one of the reasons we haven't released it to everybody else is as soon as you get involved in numbers, people push numbers to the extremes and cause problems. So whilst 34 average is very good, that doesn't mean 28 is going to be better. You might create other problems when it's 28. So things like the animals won't set as well in the cool rooms if you get too low. So there's other issues you've got to take into account, and we use the melting point as well as melting point. Another thing I haven't mentioned is high omegas. So most people would be aware that a lot of the world are convinced that if they have 3 meals of fish a week, they'll get their omega uptake in, and their brains will be fitter and heart will be better and whatever. Well, fish are about 200 milligrams of EPA and DHA omegas, and the Australian white is 34 milligrams. So we're well behind this per 100 grams. We're well behind fish, but we're miles ahead of beef and normal lamb. And there's a correlation between low melting point and high omegas. So when you push the melting point down, the omegas go up, and vice versa. IMF, intramuscular fat, on any of the trials that we've done, whether you've got 4% or 8%, doesn't change how soft the meat is. The meat still is the same. So we're not obsessed with IMF, and that obsession's come through beef industry and grain feeding. So that's something we're not obsessed with. We're doing a lot of testing, costing money. So that's basically. Yeah, there is an obsession with grain feeding to get globulized fat through your meat, and seeing that nice white fat and thinking that's good for you to eat. Or the IMF in an Australian white, it's more what we call micro marbled. It's like fleck in the meat. It's not that globular fat. So we've got people in Australia that are putting lambs into feedlots and force feeding them for 90 to 150 days to get IMF in it. But if the melting point's really high, and you put that into a modern consumer that doesn't like the fat in their palate, you're just making your problem worse. You're not improving it.
There's a question here, Graham. Larry typed in, when did Margaret become a marketing quality selling point? You know, we've seen some people throw that name around with some of their crosses, but touch on Margaret and what you've developed there.
Margaret was developed it's a combination of my brother Martin and Graham, so MARGRA. And it's a marketing thing around two brothers, one vision, and that was eating quality. Once we found that we had it, that was certainly a vision that we had. The Margaret thing is it's got to be pure Taddykill genetics in there, and it's something that's controlled around the world. We've got patents on Margaret everywhere. It can only come from the Margaret company. Is the only one that can sell that Margaret lamb. So basically, it's no different to different brands of Wagyu. Everything in the market is Wagyu, but in Australia we've got a brand called Blackmore's. It was the first one to get going and really broke ground for Wagyu, and that's basically all it is. It doesn't mean that the other Australian white hasn't got the same traits, but it can't. It's a branded product. It's like you can't go down and start a hamburger joint, call it McDonald's. Can't do it. That's all it is. But it is. We have parameters around what we take back to the Margaret product. We do export to the Margaret brand goes anywhere from into the Middle East, we're certainly into America on the West Coast, Los Angeles. We're into Singapore, Hong Kong, and all over Australia.
Even Dubai. So, you're in Dubai too, weren't you? Didn't you have a big?
Yeah, we're still in Dubai. We got. You find when you move around the world that sometimes you get burnt by people that aren't quite what they seem to be. And we got burnt with an English fella in Dubai, and it's taken a couple of years to sort that out and to get back in. That we didn't realise when some of the Emiratis contacted us there to try and get Australian whites in over there, that we said, "Oh, we'll just contact this fellow and he'll put you in." And as soon as he was involved, they wouldn't touch us. But they've come back to us, and it's hugely important where there are high Muslim populations, and we're seeing that all around the world. The Muslim population's growing through high fecundity, plenty of offspring, and that means that you've got a ready-made market for a lot of these processed meats that they can't eat with pork that they can with lamb, and it doesn't cut the mustard with beef as well. So that's why we're headed down that track. It's a very, very big market to us.
Before I ask the next question, I just think I'd say, for as many times as you've been burnt the last couple of years, I think you look like a piece of charcoal, but you're hanging up pretty good.
Look, people ask me what are people like around the world, whether it's the Chinese or whoever you're dealing with, and I find there are good people in every country. But unfortunately, for every good one you meet, you probably meet one bad one. And I take people as I find them, and I probably got burnt a lot more in Brazil than I ever did in China, and I've been burnt in Dubai. I've been burnt in America, and I walk away from a bad debt and say, well, that's a learning curve. That's not a problem, and just keep moving forward. So the important thing is for us that we find even in Australia and some places we go that all of a sudden others want to own what the Australian white is. Well, I don't even own the Australian white. I gave there's an association up here that I'm still the chairman of it, but and I might pull a fair few strings, but it's the breed. It's not the individual. So it's not me. It's the breed. So those that think that they can take a breed and hold it to themselves and it be theirs, that's a very, very narrow approach to it. We need people with open minds. And we don't encourage people to be blending the breed down with other breeds, because you change the makeup. And what we find everywhere is, even in Australia, when anyone's describing their sheep here as a shedded sheep, they always mention that there's Australian white in them. A lot of times there's no Australian white. It's probably a Dorper or some other derivative, but they don't mention that because it's not as it hasn't got as high a profile. So it's no different to when Santa Catrudas came to Australia. We still call them Santa Catrudas from King Ranch, and that's where they come from. We haven't changed the mix here. So the Kiwis decided they'd call a Kiwi white, and then they were going to call it an Anzac white, which it was when the Australians and the New Zealanders fought together in the Second World War. It was called. They were Anzacs. And then eventually they just said, well, it doesn't make any sense, because even on search engines, you don't see Australian white. If you call it something else, it doesn't come up. So you lose the advantages that we've done in how we've promoted the breed, and we've promoted pretty well. We've done it in-house, but we're not amateurs at it. We can promote it pretty well. But if you've got the product right and you promote it properly, it works. And it works. It works for a small producer. Like our largest producers are running 30,000, 40,000 females, and our smallest ones might have 5 or 6. So it suits all different operations.
Well, and that's kind of, the vision behind us setting up this association is kind of like what we've talked a lot in the past is, it's about the breed, moving this breed forward and sharing your vision and holding true to the Australian white breed. And we're wanting people to come on board with us and join us and help. Hopefully, you describing this, we're trying to align our vision with yours. We just want to kind of walk side by side, or even a step behind you a little bit, even if we can just, continue to keep improving.
It's not difficult. We've managed to get sheep. There's some very good sheep in China, and I've seen some of David's sheep over there from the embryos. They're the same sheep as what we've got here. So I did notice a question from Larry on parasite resistance. We don't have the St. Croix here, Larry. And what I will say on parasite resistance, from everything that I've seen around the world, oftentimes the most resistant sheep are not the better sheep in the mob. They're quite often some of the worst sheep in the mob, and we've seen some parasite-resistant sheep come out of New Zealand, and they might be parasite-resistant, but they're also resistant to having any meat on them. So I don't find them any different to any of our other breeds on parasite resistance, but rather than being parasite resistant, I would suggest that people look at being parasite tolerant, because what we've found is that some of your sheep can have quite high levels of worms and still hold condition, where others can have low parasite in worms but can't handle it. So it's more of being a resistant than or being able to handle a parasite rather than being resistant to them. So I don't know whether that answers your question, Larry, or not, but we're not seeing any difference here between the breeds we have in Australia and that. Yeah, all parasite resilient, yeah. And there'll be, Larry, there'll be variations in that. And the only way you know in your own area is do your own testing on it. And people have said to me, well, can you test what you've got to know whether they'll be better if I'm buying? And the problem is my area would be vastly different to most other areas, and we're actually in a high parasite area. Like we run in 30, 40 acre paddocks, or our big paddocks. A lot of the paddocks might only be 2 or 3 acres. And I had 2 mobs of young rams next to each other, and one lot suffered from some worms being in a very small paddock, and the ones next door didn't, but they're identical genetics. So it's conditions will have a lot to do with that. So when we're talking on parasites or any of those things, a lot of it's managerial. How you manage those issues has got a lot to do with it. But definitely there are some breeds that will be better than others.
Graham, what level does the meat start to change in a breed up program, like F1, F2? I think you've said F4. Is that?
It changes at F1. That's one of the issues. Yeah, but not on every animal. And the problem is, if I was to put an F1 Dorper Australian white into a restaurant anywhere in the world, I'd lose them overnight. So we're just restricting it to about the mother being F2 or maybe F3. And then we know we've got that. So it's a genetic trait that's in them. It's not a food trait. We're pulling sheep from as far away as Longreach in northern Queensland, in a very dry, hot area, all the way down to the wet areas in Victoria, and selling them as one brand, and it's eating the same. Okay. So it's a genetic trait that's in there. It's like your chicken industry. They control the genetics. So basically, Tadikula itself controls the genetics, and we move it whichever way we want. If we give everybody the ability to control the genetics of the Australian white, it'll be a mess. Mm-hmm. If I gave them all the data that we have to do that, and data is important, the biggest problem in the sheep and cattle industry is most of the data that's in there is entered by the people that own the animals, and then they manipulate the data. So it's the only data that I'm interested in is how well it eats and how well it hangs up and how quickly it hangs up.
It's very interesting to hear you talk about the shed pattern, because I noticed that on my F1 ewe lambs this spring. We had them locked up here lambing, and I couldn't figure out where they were rubbing on their wethers, and because they couldn't, I had nothing in there for them to rub on. And there was a good percentage of them that were shedding from the wethers down and back down their spine. And I thought I was seeing things, and then I started doing some more research online and saw other people's pictures in Australia of that. And it's a much more convenient shed pattern, if you ask me. It was quite amazing to watch this spring.
Well, the shed pattern of the Dorpers, they shed from the belly up.
Yep.
The shed pattern on the Australian white, we've got them where they break out of the back of the neck and down off the shoulder, and the last thing they'd lose might be around the rump. Not all do that. Some still shed on the side first, but what we push towards is that shedding from the back, and that came from one animal. It goes back to Ram. I think he was born in 2009 or 10. 183 was his number, and he was the only one that did it. So we line bred that into all of the sheep. So every sheep that does that has got him somewhere in the background. And the comparison with that is, and I use the Santa Gertrudis as an example. Why, when you crossed a shorthorn and a Brahman, have you got red cattle? And there's only one answer. There was one bull in there called Monkey, and he had the red factor, and they bred everything to Monkey or his relations, and they got a red cow. So we've done the same thing with the Australian white. To get that shedding pattern right, it had to be, they will go back to that one ram, and it's a very, very important trait that they should get off the back. It's like oftentimes you'll see a sheep that will shed like pulling a doona off a bed. The whole thing will just come off in one in one sheep. And it needs to be hair under that, not wool. We don't want wool.
And these have hair. They had hair. They shed off just a beautiful coat. And of course, that's been one of my complaints with the Dorpers here is the wool versus the hair. And I was, like I said, I was really perplexed there for a while, and then started looking, and it's like, well, that's what they're supposed to do. And so,
well, that's what it was. We had Dorpers, and the reason that the Dorper helmed the wool is they're a cross of only two breeds, the Dorset Horn and the black-headed Persian. And what they found was the Persian was quite a skinny, hollow-gutted type of animal, and the Dorset had a lot of shape. So when they threw to more wool, they had more shape, and it was better eating, better meat. So they had a better carcass. So they decided to keep the carcass and keep a bit of wool on it, and that meant they had the carcass. So what we had in the early crosses was our sheep that threw to wool had better carcasses, but we kept pushing to get the head sheep with the carcass, and now we don't have any sheep with basically any wool on them at all. Although in saying that, the wool, there's a little bit of downs type wool in the early coats that's in the top of the fleece, but it's not at the skin. The skin, it's all hair.
And do another question on your genetic stuff. Due to basically our limited number of genetics here right now, how close can we go back to, say, in a breed up program to the same rams? Like a father-daughter, a father-grandfather, or daughter-grandfather? What?
We use line breeding, and that means, to give you an example, the ram that you're looking at over the top of the A is a ram. His number was 48, and this is on your American Australian White Sheep Society. That particular ram, I joined him to his twin sister. So he was at the time he was 50% Dorper. He was 25% Dorset and 25% Henri. And I joined him to his twin sister. They both had all the traits that we were looking for. So he's natural born at an F2 to see what would happen when you put brother to sister together, so that you're intensifying the genetic traits. So whilst both he and his sister shed beautifully, I ended up on that one flush. I got 6 lambs or 5 lambs, and only one of them shed. All the others were virtually pure wool sheep. So what that did was teach me that in using that ram or his sons, I didn't look for the carcass and all the other traits. The one thing that I had to concentrate on is picking a son that had hair, so that it would shed. And a lot of sheep go back to him, obviously, but it was the line breeding showed me how to join those. So a lot of our sheep now, if I look at the pedigree and go back far enough, you get back 3rd, 4th, 5th generation, and all the sires are all very, very closely related, and that gives you the consistency. But we haven't got 5 legs. We don't have 2 heads. We don't have any other genetic traits that some of the geneticists around the world that have reinvented genetics say that you're getting mutations if you get too close. If you get too close, you identify the recessive genes that are there. That's not mutations. So in Angus cattle, curly calf and 5th limb, that didn't come from within the Angus breed. It came from putting other breeds into the Angus by stealth, and then by the time they became on both sides and you put them back together, that recessive gene drops out, or it expresses itself. So we had some recessive genes that we had to be very careful didn't come into this breed in the start. One was microphthalmia, which is in the texels, where they're born with no eyes, and another one was the one where the skin rubs off the doors. And we didn't have either of those in there. If we did, it would have expressed itself by this stage. But we put sheep in that didn't have those traits not on DNA testing, on the fact that the breeds we put in were line bred, so we knew they didn't have those traits anyway. So that's how close can you go when you're putting like to like? They've got to complement each other. So if they're like genetics, you've got to complement the other side. And basically, the only difference in getting something from or getting more genetics from here is it'll just be more honed genetics. They'll be I would hope better than what the previous ones have been by sheep that we've done more selection on.
So if you have a sire that is a good size sire, he's got all the attributes you're looking for, he sheds, he's black points and all that, then you can use him on his daughters and so forth. But if your sire's lacking in some of that stuff, you probably don't want to reuse him because you will expand on those qualities.
You'll double your problems, or you use the son of that ram that improves it. So we had we had probably a pretty famous ram last year that made 240,000. There were a syndicate of 4 bought the ram. He was quite exceptional, and one of those syndicate came back and bought one of his best sons this year to go with the daughters.
Okay.
And when you're putting sheep together like that, if you buy 2 rams by 1 sire, and you join the progeny of those, you're not ending up with 100% of the sire. So each one only has 50% of the genes anyway. So by the time you cross them back, they're still only 50%. But if you keep going and you keep pushing, it's more you develop faults if you don't know what you're doing. And when you develop faults, it allows you to fix the faults. That's what line breeding is about. So some people will say line breeding when it's inbreeding when it doesn't work, and it's line breeding when it works. Well, that's not really the case. It's you're either line breeding faults or you're line breeding qualities. That's how it works. And looking at a number on a piece of paper won't help you. This breed's been developed around our eyes, like our family's eyes, hands. We don't weigh all our sheep. We've just been through and picked out at weaning all the 40 of the better ram lambs to be potential stud rams for next season, and not one of them was weighed. They're all done visually. The only thing we can't do visually, we can do loin, we can do carcass shape, we can do weight visually. You don't have to weigh them to know which are the heavier lambs. We can't do this eating quality visually. You just can't. I tried to identify traits that may be linked to what we were coming up with the melting points, and I can't. There's no correlation with that.
Thank you.
Here's some questions for you, Graham. After years of your selecting and breeding, what % of your lamb crop do you select as breeding stock?
Depends on whether we're trying to explode the population more. At the moment, we're looking at doing less embryo transfer work because of my sons are in their mid to late 30s, and they tell me I've worn them out with all the embryo work. So they've got young families, and it's a workload thing. So when you're doing a lot of embryo transfer work, you obviously don't keep as many females. But we'd be looking at we'd be keeping 50% of the females at the moment to build our ewe base up. So we cull very heavily on the old ewes and get rid of them and move to the next generation. So that's how we've changed the feet from being white and striped to being all black. So our ewes that we keep now, they've got a solid black foot, no stripes, no white feet. So that when you're progressing, you've got to cull heavier. But it's to the stage now we've got no problems to keep 50% of it. That's of our stud ewes. But if you move into our commercial sheep, we'd be keeping 80 to 90% would be making the grade to being a really good ewe on the commercial side.
What do you like for your mature weights on your rams and ewes, Graham?
I've got to work in kilos. Ewes and we've got we're talking 70 to 85 kilos on ewes and up to 120 kilos on rams. And then that will vary if they have any grain at all, or what conditions, how warm the climate is, whether they're running on alfalfa or lucerne, whether they're just doing it on natural pastures. It'll vary, but we don't want an animal that's too big. because if they get too big, they eat too much, and then they won't put enough into the milk to finish lamb. So we're not after. We don't want to breed giants. And that's something in America. When we look at a lot of the sheep breeds in America, they more look like alpacas to me than they do sheep. They're all legs and no body, and that's not practical. You can't breed sheep like that and make money in this country. Even though we've moved in Australia through genetics, through estimated breeding values, has decimated the Australian sheep industry. And I'm out on a limb saying that because most of the people are in it, and they're like the climate change people. They take all the data that suits their argument, and that's the only thing they'll listen to. They won't listen to anything else. But reality is the sheep aren't as good carcass-wise and growth rates as what they were. So there's no point in having growth rates that are giraffes. So they weigh well, but it's only bones that are weighing. It's not meat. So we're after high percentage, deep bodies, big spring of rib, large loins, but not getting obsessed with loin only, because the majority of the meat's in the hindquarter. So if you want to increase your yields on your sheep, like your dressing percentages, your hindquarters, where you want to improve that. And then if you've got high quality meat, you can turn the hind leg into an exceptional product. Where on a lot of lamb, the hind leg's the hardest thing to sell. It's certainly not an Australian white.
Any other questions, folks? By all means, take advantage of this opportunity. One thing I'll throw in, Graham, you talked about, the growth rate of the sheep. One thing that stood out to me when we first started this was the growth rate to 100, and then after that, to the mature weight. If you would describe that to the folks, what you've seen there.
The design of the breed was to grow to about 90% mature weight by the time it was 12 months old. So to hit a ram to hit 100, 110 kilos at 12 months, we don't expect him to end up 150 or 60. We want him to stop at 120. Now that was something we found in the Texel breed. They grew about 90% of their mature weight was in that first 12 months. So some of our Dorset rams are ending up 170 kilos, and they're just too big. That's an issue to us if they get too big. So we want to keep them at a sensible size. So this is not a foot race to see who can run the 100 metres the fastest. This is a case of we put parameters, and that's where we think they should sit to be a balanced approach, not one way or the other. So that's what it is. I saw your question there, Larry. Yes, the loin cuts are certainly more expensive than the hind legs for us, but we're in the process of evaluating our hind legs to turn them into hams and do different things with it, which means they'll actually be more value to us than the loins. So the loin's a traditional thing you can sell into restaurants. The rumps, the racks, that's all traditional stuff. Or as I said before, pulled shoulders, that's great in restaurants. But we're looking at rolling the shoulder out and turning half the shoulder into bacon, and doing some other stuff with the rest of the shoulder. So even best sausages I've ever eaten are Australian white sausages, no pork fat, just Australian white lamb with its own fat. So there's all these different things you can do if the quality of your fat is good enough. And with that really low melting point fat, we get that softness in the taste. So there's not much in the bite. It's very easy. There's one from Dan. Do you castrate your commercial rams for meat quality? Yes. Yes. So we don't take the tails off it. We take the testicles off because you will get tainting on your ram side. They'll grow a bit quicker with the testicles in, but the quality of the meat's not as good.
I would just like to say, Graham, I've followed your sale and all your stuff for pretty significantly for 3 years. And then some of your stud producers there that have bought from you. and the gains that you guys make through your embryo transfer and your selections is just amazing to me. And I'm not just saying that because, I mean, we're trying to do something similar, but it's so interesting to watch you guys, and the genetic development that you guys do through embryo transfer in such a short amount of time is impressive. And I appreciate it. And I would just want you to know that it's
Excellent.
just it's the consistency in your sale catalog is amazing.
Well, consistency only comes with tight breeding. You've got a chicken industry around the world that are all line bred. They cross them to get hybrid vigor, but they line breed them to get consistency. They have to have, the only thing that's stuck with the chicken industry around the world is the consistency of the product. So that's something we understand that. As I said, I've been at this for a long time. That's what it is, a consistency thing. There's no point having one good one and 99 bad ones. We'd rather 99 pretty reasonable ones and one bad one. So now, Jane, I saw something when you asked to on the follicle. So, and I'll come back to Larry's question. That's a really good one as well. The follicle is a hollow fibre. So it's, if you pull the fibre out of an Australian white, it's actually like a crinkle cut chip. It's not straight. It's got a wave in it, and it's a hollow fibre. So the hollow fibre means it keeps the animal warmer because it's a natural. It's warmer than wool, particularly on a young sheep, because wool sheep aren't born with a follicle. Larry, I would suggest what you've mentioned on cheaper prices on sheep. The good sheep are still selling extremely well at much higher rates than anything else. But if you follow the American Australian white sheep breeders site, you would think everything is a problem in the Australian whites. It's the most frustrating thing that's happened to the Australian whites, is that one that's administered in America. There's a lot of scamming on it. There are people on a weekly basis in Australia that are scammed off the American site. It's the worst thing that's ever happened in my sheep breeding over my whole life, is to think that site is virtually unadministered, and the rubbish that's going on it. There are people that are breeding other breeds that are constantly bagging the Australian white, and that's not what it is in Australia. I sold commercial ewes the other day for $535. The same week you could have bought Australian whites for $80 or $100, but they weren't any good. So in a breed that's just starting, everybody jumps on board and starts to promote and push, and everybody wants to be part of making some money out of that breed. And obviously, Taddy Curl's made a lot of money in the last few years out of it, with unbelievable sales of livestock at big dollars. But it's our clients coming back that are happy with the breed. What we see on that site administered out of America is not what Australian whites are. Some of the animals on there are disgraceful. They're not registered sheep. They're backyarders they're scammers. Like we're seeing, you name it, you see it on there. People trying to sell clippers all the time. What do you need clippers for an Australian white? And people complaining about them not shedding. Or I bought a ram and it didn't shed. Well, you're an idiot. You bought a ram that was never going to shed. And that there's one fella on there all the time on that. And then as soon as someone puts up a commercial lamb and say, well, get in touch with me, I'm about to take the testicles out. If you're not quick, it won't have testicles. He's the first bloke to jump on and ask for the price on it. So it's so frustrating. I've talked to the administrator, and to be worried about it. He thinks that it's good for the breed. It's not as disgraceful. If I could blow it up, I would. It's not good for the breed. So that within Australia, there are other Australian white sites where there's no scamming. We don't mind people putting comments on there to help others with any issues they may have, whether it's a shedding issue or whether the feet are growing too much or whether they haven't got enough shape. We're happy to talk about all those things, but not have lunatics in there that are just there as haters, and they're basically they're Facebook warriors, they're haters. I've actually rung some of them that I know and just asked them, why are you being so stupid? You're attacking a breed. If you have a problem with it, don't buy it. Don't do it. Why get on there and knock it all the time? But the people that are happy with it, they're not even on the Facebook sites. So it's bad for the Australian wide industry to have people being scammed. Like just locally, we had 5 people turn up to an old couple's farm in Bathurst, which is 70 kilometres away, over a period of a week to pick up their sheep. And these people, they're an old retired couple that don't even own any sheep. So they were just scammed, and they were scammed off that site, and it's not good. So, all right, Dan.
Get you off that
Dan's
topic. Your face is getting about to raise your hat now, Graham. So we better move on.
I am so furious on that site, and it's I saw it like it's anything on it. Like there was a Wiltshire horn ram on there the other day that someone's saying, well, it's got foot rot and there's this. The ram's been founded. Any clown could see it's founded. That's how a founded sheep hops around like that. I don't talk on Facebook. I don't do any of that. Otherwise, my face would be red all the time. What was brassicas? Yes, brassicas. If you drive past a canola crop and smell it, a rape crop, canola oil, smell what it smells like. Doesn't smell good. You put lambs on that and cook it, and that's what they smell like. So it taints the meat. They've got to be off it for about a month. So we grow brassicas and our breeding stock go on it. They're really good, but we don't put stock to eat on it. They're no good. We've done all the trials. Couldn't eat it.
Are there any other forages? I think where that question was going at, were there any other forages that you found that have either positively or negatively affected them?
It's difficult for an old farmer to be reading and talking and watching. I didn't get through the whole thing before it dropped off. We use chicory. We use plantain. They don't. Plantain. Yeah, plantain. We grow a bit of plantain. If you've got a mix in a paddock, it's normally better. But we know that it works if they're running on ryegrass, clovers. It's some tall fescues are okay, but you've got to keep that short for them to do any good on them. We run, but it's mainly we'll put a crop in and finish them on the crop when they wound. So does that answer the question, Dan?
Yes, thank you.
Question from Kelsey. So that's I don't think I got the whole question there, but
I can read it to you, Graham. Do you
Ryegrass.
have your advice for new sheep producers that are doing a breed up program? We are breeding to Katahdin ewes. What's your advice or suggestions there?
Katahdin's an animal that's very, very similar looking animal to the Australian white. It's got hopefully a hair coat. You've got different colours in it. We've taken most of the coloured side out of the Australian white. The difference is with the Katahdin, it's some Croy base, and it hasn't got modern genetics in it. So for anyone, if they were going to go onto our Facebook page on Taddy Curl, you'd see some of our Dorsets have got incredible shape. So they've got big hindquarters and width in the loin and body depth. So that's a modern. I'm sorry.
Oh,
yeah, I'm not getting that question.
Yeah, Steve, you're in and out. You're on mute right now, Steve Lopez. If you had another question, you can.
So the upgrade with a Katahdin is good, and the difference Katahdin and Australian white would be growth rate, carcass is different. It just enhances those areas, and anybody that's used them over there has seen that change. Is growth rates and carcass shape. Eating quality, I can't I can't tell you that a Katahdin doesn't eat well because I haven't eaten them. But the eating quality will be left in the sheep. At every cross, you will improve the eating quality to get to about third, fourth cross, and there won't be any difference to the purebreds. So Steve had a question, did he?
Looks like he's still on mute. So
what was Victoria? What was her question?
do you lose the eating quality when crossing Australian white with other breeds?
You will. You will lose it depending on what breed. If you cross with a merino, it won't be very good. It'll be better than a merino, but not good. So most of your wool sheep, the finer and the better they are at growing wool, the worse they are at growing meat. So that's like a dairy cow, doesn't grow meat very well, but she has a lot of milk. It's the same thing. It's protein in one end and it comes out the other end in sheep. It's wool, it's milk, it's meat. And they're the three derivatives. But to think you can have all three doesn't work, although the Australian white sheep milks very well. They've got a very compact udder, and they milk very well, and they've got a high quality milk. But if they're growing wool, and we've done crossing, putting Pole Dorsets back with Australian whites to do an F1 to see if we gain growth rate, and we didn't. And the reason being they started growing wool again. So if protein's going into the wool, then you don't get as much growth in the carcass.
Good points. We're coming down to the last few minutes here. Still ask away questions if you got any. I'll make sure I get this in before I forget. But if anybody is interested, we do have some embryos left over at RSG in Indiana. Feel free to reach out to us. We're going to be offering some embryos for you to implant yourself or have done there at the facility, or we were also going to sell some scan and use to get some genetics out there. We want to get this breed out there to people and get it on their farm so you guys can see how it goes. I mean, the only way you're going to know is if you get it on your farm and see how it's working. We want to get the breed out there and do it properly. This is, like Graham says, this is everybody's breed, and let's just do it a service and keep holding true to the values of it. But and also this will be recorded, so if anybody has any questions they didn't understand, they can re-listen to this recording. We'll ship it out to anybody that did sign up for this, so they will have the recording in their email. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But any other questions here for Graham while he's joining us? Graham, you answered them all.
Oh, sounds really good.
That darn good. Darn good. We
Stan. Look, I just enjoy the people that I've met around the world through this breed, and the other breeds that I've had. But it's something that we control. We're controlling what happens in the breed at Taddick Hill, being the parent breed to the whole thing. And what happens on that is you get a little bit of tall poppy syndrome. Some people decide that they might be able to do it better than we are, and eventually someone may be better. But at this stage, I think we're pushing it in the right direction. And it's not the perfect sheep, but it's a modern sheep, a modern sheep that the world needs, because you can't afford to be shearing sheep. That's I'm a shearer. I shore all my life up until my late 50s, and I'm busted because of it. So it doesn't work. And here we're throwing the wool away. The rest of the world's throwing it away too. We're just about to go in and shear 1,000 Pole Dorset ewes, and we have to plead and beg for shearers to come in. My sons can shear them themselves if they don't have time, and the shearers don't want to shear them. So that's what it's all about. And we do a lot of promotion on that side of it. We've just put a promotion out on how this is a clean and green product, but we've put other stuff out on the eating quality, and we do a lot of work now in just putting forward on commercial aspects of our own commercial property. So when we have someone come in to look at sheep, we don't show them what they might think be pampered stud sheep. We take them to a commercial block and say, well, there it is. That's how it's being run.
Well, Graham, this has been fun. It's been really informative. I think everybody can agree that we all enjoyed our time here this evening. We'll have to try to catch up again here and do something like this again. This has been great. So appreciate everybody taking their time to join us and listen to Graham. We're very passionate about this breed. It's why we're doing what we're doing. There's another question there. What consumer education material is available?
Look, basically from the Australia-wide perspective, the only one that's done anything on promotion is ourselves. So Tattykill's got all that. It's got all that information there, and we don't mind people selling off the back of what we've discovered in the breed or the advantages of running the Australian wide. It's all there for anybody to use. So it's as long as Tattykill's getting, you realise that if you share something from Tattykill, we don't mind. That's fine, and it doesn't all have to. It's not as though everything's got to come back to us and we've got to make money out of it. I spend as much time talking to people with 10 sheep as I do with people with 10,000. It doesn't change it, and some of the extraordinary prices that you've seen in our sales, they've blown us away too. And we came back down this year from sort of $5 million sales back to 1.7. I think the sale was this year. Still extraordinary. Most of the other sales in the country on sheep like that, they might bring in 200,000 or 300,000. There's a massive gap, and in commercial sheep, it's the same thing. We don't have some of the supermarket chains chasing us. The Australian whites, it's not making a premium in every market. Neither does Wagyu beef. It's got to go into the right areas to get the premium. So it just takes time to build these. And just remember, this breed was launched in 2011. It's been a pretty meteoric rise to being the premium sheep breed in Australia anyway, and in China. So the Chinese, just on that fecundancy side, the number of lambs, the Chinese got in, were blown away by the sheep, and then some of them moved back and said, we're not getting enough lambs. So they moved to other breeds, and now they come back again and said, oh, whoops, we lost everything we had by crossing them with other breeds. So they've come back on board, and they're after a better product. So even in China, in some of the top hotels in Shanghai, local Australian white is on the menu. Local Chinese Australian white. So it's not just happening here; it's happening in China as well.
The momentum's hot, and it's we're going to keep on the upward trend that you guys have set in place. So we just that's why we wanted to get you on, just so people could at least have a somewhat of a point of reference of who you are, what you're doing, your vision. And I think you explained it very clearly today, and it hits home with what the breed is and where it's going, in my opinion. So we appreciate you, Graham.
That's fine. Look, if anyone that's on there wants to talk to us at all or talk to me, as Sonia and Luke and David will say, look, I'm only a phone call away. We're happy to talk. This is I'm not on here to try and sell genetics. I'm here to try and help the Australian white sheep in America, and those of you that have backed us in buying genetics. At the moment, we don't have any more embryos for sale other than the ones that you've got over there, Luke.
Yeah, and the number is dwindling more and more until we can get some more stuff to flush and get in. So
we're in the process of, because of government and bureaucracy, we're going through and getting our own centre up so that we'll be able to take embryos here instead of sending them to the other side of Australia to do it. So we'll be able to send the very best genetics we've got, because we'll be able to flush the animals that are here on the farm that we won't let out of our site. So the quality of the stock, not the embryo quality, but the actual livestock quality, when we start again, which hopefully will be beginning of next year, it'll go up again.
And I would just like to say some of the things with the F1s that I found that they made our lamb crop very consistent. We have F1s and F2s, and I mean, you can't go out there and unless I have a few colored up lambs, but they are incredibly consistent with one crossing on. I have Dorper Katahdin ewes, and just they'd all look similar. And I've just been just pleasantly shocked and love it. So
that scores through the sheep being homozygous, not heterozygous, so closely bred, so they dominate whatever you join them to. They'll be the dominant breed. You join them with a Dorper, they'll look more Australian white than Dorper. You join them with a Katahdin, and they'll throw to Australian white. You join them to a Rambulate, they'll look Australian white because it's dominant. They're homozygous for the breed type, not heterozygous for breed type. So
wow.
it's homozygous, they're line bred. It's like most Scotsmen have got red hair and blue eyes. It's just a trait that's in the breed, and that's we've done that deliberately.
It works. So thank you.
Graham, your time is invaluable, and we appreciate you taking the time to chat with us this afternoon. And
St. Croix Cross would be okay, Larry. They're not as obviously as growthy as sheep as what a Katahdin is. So where this has all come from is all the sheep came out of South Africa. That's why they're in the West Indies and Brazil are the ones that got most of the head sheep, and they came with the slave trade and the Negroes. That's how they ended up in those different places. So St. Croix and Barbados Black Belly, that's where your Katahdin came from. Then you go into Brazil and you've got the head sheep went in there. They became modern overs, which were the local sheep, and then they turned into Santanese. Then here, look, we've got head sheep now, and the derivatives have either come in different breeds here have come from Damaras, which is South African. Our hair comes from the Von Rui, which is South African. So they've all come from one area. That's where it's come from. But the movement around the world was with the slave trade. That's how they ended up in Brazil and the West Indies, and then they moved to Maine, and with the St. Croix turned into a Katahdin, and yeah. So that's just the evolution of sheep, where originally the world actually a lot of industry was around this wool. The woolen industry was massive around the world. It's no longer massive. It's a cottage industry. What people are, they're not cold, they're hungry, and we're going to feed them.
We're going to feed them Australian white lamb. Well, if there's no other burning questions, Graham, we're going to respect your time and.
Okay. No, that's fine. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining in, and yeah, hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah, we'll look forward to setting another date here, and really do appreciate your time again, Graham, and keep up the good work, and our regards you and your family. Hope everything's going well for you guys, and we'll touch base again. Everybody, thank you for coming on. This was recorded again, so we'll ship out the link after we get it processed here. So Graham, thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
No problems at all. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Hope to see you in America one day.
Maybe you can get me over there for that internship still.
Okay. All right. Cheers. Bye.
Take care.